Thanks for staying with us. You're watching special broadcast Prime Minister Modi in Ukraine, and we continue to have Ambassador Soni in our Delhi studio, former ambassador to Ukraine, and also Professor Swarn Singh continues to be with us. And before we move on with the conversation about what really makes this visit of Indian Prime Minister Modi in Ukraine so critical and significant, let's move on. In fact, Prime Minister Modi arrived in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, on a day-long visit to Ukraine. These are the shots earlier of Prime Minister's arrival. Prime Minister arrived in Kyiv from Poland on board a Rail Force One. That's the train in the second and the final leg of his two-nation trip. It may be recalled, Prime Minister Modi is the first ever Indian Prime Minister to visit Ukraine since the establishment of the diplomatic relations between the two countries. Upon his arrival, Prime Minister Modi received a very warm welcome by the Indian community there. Prime Minister Modi, in fact, is visiting Ukraine at the invitation of President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Prime Minister Modi also paid floral tributes to Gandhi's statue in Kyiv. Indian Prime Minister Modi's visit to Ukraine comes nearly 6 weeks after his very high-profile trip to Moscow as well, which was preceded by a visit to Austria. Prime Minister Modi has always made a strong appeal for peace and reiterating that strong appeal for global peace. And then Indian Prime Minister also met President Zelenskyy. Both leaders honored the memory of Ukrainian children at Martyrologist Exposition in Kyiv. In fact, Martyrologist Exposition in Kyiv is symbolic, or it stands as a testimony to recall and pay respects to those who have lost their lives in the Russia-Ukraine conflict so far. And let's stay with these visuals and also go across to DD India's senior correspondent Amritpal Singh joining us live from our DD India studios, tracking the story very, very closely. Amrit, over to you. The significance of this visit, the deliverables that are on the agenda for both sides, and the timings and the intent, very, very important.
That's right. There are various aspects to the visit of Prime Minister Modi to Ukraine. One, there is, of course, as you said, the timing is important. The war has been raging for about 2.5 years when it began in February 2022, and it rages on. So given the fact that the Prime Minister takes this first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Kyiv or to Ukraine after it became a country in 1991 on the dissolution of Soviet Union, symbolizes that this the message of peace that India wishes to send across to both the Russian capital and the Ukrainians, and also to the rest of the world, that it is imperative that peace, a peaceful solution which is just and long-lasting, be brought with immediate effect. The second is, of course, the bilateral aspect of the relationship, how to take that forward. And third, as India assumes an unsaid presidency or leadership of the global south, Prime Minister Modi, during his talks with President Zelenskyy, would put forward that why it is important to strengthen networks, immediately put an end to the war through peace, through dialogue and diplomacy, and not through military victory, because military victory, one, is not in sight, and secondly, it is not a desirable solution in itself, because that does not provide any solutions. So the most vulnerable of the world, where 2/3 of the world's population resides, that's the global south, are getting involved and are bearing the consequences of a conflict which is not of their own making. Therefore, from the point of view of humanity, of those who's making this war is not, are suffering the consequences of it. Your own children are dying. Children are dying on both sides.
Yes.
The Prime Minister's visit to this martyrology exposition symbolizes exactly
Absolutely.
that.
Yes.
Sakal.
Yes, and also, you know, the first engagement there being paying floral tributes at the statue of Mahatma Gandhi, who has been a global messenger from India for the world peace by and large. But Amrit, also, since you've followed this so closely in Russia and Ukraine, and we've seen in the last few months or so, there has been a very concerted effort by the Indian establishment to tap the Eastern and Central Europe as far as strategic ties and Indian diplomacy is concerned. You know, there is a clear shift, a very nuanced shift there.
Yes, it is. I mean, you know, if you look at India's relationship, India's foreign policy, the focus has been essentially or traditionally been on Western Europe. There is a slow shift taking place as India rises in its stature globally, its heft increases, it realizes engaging with different parts of the world is important. As Prime Minister yesterday in Poland said that India's earlier policy was of non-alignment, equidistance from everybody. Now there's a shift that the engagement with all. So the Prime Minister, or this government, especially in its foreign policy, which has been, changing over a period of time, the need for engagement with all corners of the world, not just with the past that be, because the world dynamic is changing, the power dynamic is changing, and if also needs to change and push for the pace of that change to be accelerated. So there is indeed a shift, and we see that, and that is an integral part of the engagement with Eastern European countries.
Engagement with Eastern European countries, or also the outreach by some of the Eastern European countries to India. We know that for sure that you had your Ukrainian foreign minister here in India, in Delhi, and then this visit comes on the invitation of President Zelenskyy, and it coincides with their Independence Day in the war-torn Ukraine. So for Ukraine, what makes this very, very essential and significant?
For Ukraine, it's important that a player of the significance of India, and which has been an important voice of reason, be engaged with. Prime Minister has been consistently speaking with President Zelenskyy over the phone. He's met him. The last he met him was in Italy on the sidelines of the G7 summit, where both Prime Minister Modi and President Zelenskyy were invited. They had a one-on-one meeting. There has been a constant engagement. Also, it's important, India's importance in this whole dynamic becomes important because it's one of the few countries which, with this sort of a diplomatic or political heft, that has a foot in both doors. India talks to both sides. A Prime Minister was in Russia about 6 weeks back. So, and here India, does some straight talking, tells both sides that the cost, the humanitarian cost of this war is far too much when weighed or compared with what you may achieve. While India commits itself to principles of, the UN Charter, the respect for sovereignty, for territorial integrity, and therefore advocates finding a lasting and a peaceful solution based on principles of justice. But India, and which is in keeping with the UN Charter, but India also, put stress on that the humanitarian cost, the loss of innocent lives, the consequences being borne by those who are not directly involved in it due to food insecurity, due to energy insecurity, who've been brought to the brink of starvation because of this raging war. And India talks to both sides. Therefore, President Zelenskyy would be very interested in listening to what Prime Minister Modi has to say, because he hears the other side as well, well and, has a perspective on how both sides look at the problem. Say, for example, the Russians will not be interested in talking to the West or the American president, but they'd be interested in hosting the Indian Prime Minister, while they know very well that the Indian Prime Minister met the Ukrainian president on the sidelines of G7, but or the West realizes that you buying oil during the conflict, though they kept finger pointing at you that you may be funding the war in a certain way by buying Russian oil, but they had to come around and see that why it is important for energy security, because that oil wasn't just being brought into India, but from India it was going on back to Europe, which was itself battling energy crisis.
Yes, besides other points, you've raised a very, very important point there, the last one. Well, India speaks, the world listens. And here, Amrit, I would request you if you could just stay with us in the discussion. Very important to welcome also Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, former Director General Infantry, joining us on the show. Just to elaborate a bit more, Lieutenant General Kulkarni, on Amrit's point, and we continue to have Professor Swaran Singh with us, and in our studio, Ambassador Soni, former Indian envoy to Ukraine. Sir, well, India talks. The world listens, but the Europe needs India now, especially the war theatre. Amidst war theatre, Indian Prime Minister being one of the few leaders of the world who has visited Russia, Poland, Austria, now in Ukraine.
Definitely, Sakal, it is very, very important, because everyone who's been going to Poland and Ukraine primarily has been with a view to either motivate Zelenskyy to carry on, or to equip him to the hill to ensure that the war prolongs. It's only the Indian Prime Minister who's there with nothing like that. He's been there having good old friendship with Russia and also with Ukraine. And it is that, keeping that in mind, that we find off late there has been a lot of interaction between Ukraine and India, the ministers coming in, even on the sidelines, Glasgow, Hiroshima. You find that the Prime Minister has been meeting him, and of course our own, fantastic relations with Russia. So it is not, we are not there with Russia to instigate, promote, motivate for war. Definitely not, because to begin with only the Prime Minister was very clear that this isn't an era of war. It's diplomacy, and we have to ensure, not battlefield, but on the table, that things can be negotiated, things can be talked about. Zelenskyy is aware of it, that Indians have played a huge role in Ukraine. Ukraine understands. If at all Russia was expansionist, presuming that Russia was expansionist in 1991, Ukraine wouldn't have been getting its independence. The fact that Russia's own, I would rather say that NATO coming too close to Russia is what the concern was, not Ukraine, not taking Ukraine. That wasn't the issue. If that was so, in 1991 itself, Ukraine would not have separated from Soviet Union. So Zelenskyy knows that the Indian Prime Minister is not there. He's there to see, can he facilitate, can he make sure, can some good sense prevail on both sides, because negotiations are very difficult. First, because Zelenskyy feels, and Ukraine would rather feel, as long as they're being equipped, there is no question that they would want to give up. Russia would very well know that it is not just Ukraine it's fighting 30 countries, and therefore doesn't matter, let us see how far they go. So neither of them are going to give it so easily. But there is a scope, there is a hope. The Kursk offensive, wherein Ukraine has managed to get about 1,200 odd square kilometers, does give a feeling that there is a possibility of negotiation. There is a possibility of getting Russia on the table. There is a possibility that for the first time the Russians have felt after Second World War, someone's got into Russia. So there is, the kind of the bridges being destroyed, the kind of equipment and ammunition arsenal being given to Ukraine, which now seems to bother Russia. So there is a scope, there is a possibility. And I think the Prime Minister, with the kind of image that he has now in the world, the kind of, the understanding, the global G20 summit, all of it.
So this strategic heft that you're talking about, Amrit, again coming to you. Let me take this question to Professor Swaran Singh, this talking point, and Amrit continues to stay with us. The strategic heft that India brings to the table, and now trade. Now, let's also, besides the symbolism and optics, Professor Swaran Singh, talk about what is really on agenda in terms of taking this ties to the next level You're talking about defense. We're talking about bilateral ties between the two countries. We will not jump the gun. We'll wait for the formal statements that are really coming in. But the fact that EU is one of India's largest trading partners, and Ukraine being amongst the top 50 as far as the whole gamut of EU grouping is concerned. So we are also looking at enhancing trade ties. And there is also this conversation that defense could also figure out in the conversations between the two leaders.
Thank you for bringing in this question, because it seems the entire visit is getting overcast with this being a mediator, facilitator, messenger, and so on. There is also a very strong bilateral relationship that India and Ukraine can build together. After all, you all remember when the war started, the whole world came to know Ukraine was granary of the world. It was supplying foods to, around the world to so many countries. But I think more important to remember that in the Soviet Union times, Ukraine was the second most powerful military Soviet in that group. It was also the most powerful nuclear Soviet of the USSR. Indeed, when it became independent in 1991, Ukraine had nuclear weapons more than the other nuclear weapon states like China, UK, or France. Of course, it agreed to give up those weapons and got security guarantees in return, which is how the big confusion today is. But what I'm underlining here is the reality of Ukraine being a very important, potentially very strong economic partner for India, but even more important in the sense of becoming defense partner for India, because it is very advanced establishment of defense technologies and equipment and so on. So, of course, I agree with General that Indian Prime Minister is not there to, speak in terms of raising the morale of forces so that you continue to fight against Russia, which is how much West has done. He has gone there with a very clear agenda that he wants to contribute to as much as possible to bring these two nations to begin to talk to each other, start diplomacy, dialogue, and whatever India can do in implementing whatever they come to an agreement, India will not shy away from contributing there. But I think this is also going to be a stepping stone for a very significant, possibly very powerful economic and defense cooperation.
Yes, sir. Let's take this point to our colleague who tracks MEA very closely, Amritpal there. Yes, Amrit. So we're also looking at a robust relationship going forward in trade and economic and defense domain, though we are waiting for the formal statement on that. But there are a lot of conversations that are happening around it.
You had a very robust relationship pre-war with them. If you look at the figures of trade, you had a trade of about, I think, $3.4 billion, which after the war for the past 2 years has fallen to about $0.7 billion. So it's come down, say, about, close to about 1/4 of what it used to be. There is an imperative, the need for, resuming that and taking it again to greater heights is imperative, because as Professor Swaran Singh was saying, that the world came to know when that Ukraine was the granary of the world. The whole Black Sea region was a big, and that's why was a big supplier of food to the world, and that's why you saw food insecurity come in. Countries like India could take it, but there were countries who came to the brink of starvation, both in the African continent and in the Pacific, because the sea routes, the sea lanes, the supply chains got disrupted. So India itself was, I think, Ukraine was the biggest exporter of sunflower oil to India. All that has come down significantly. Because the supply chains have been disrupted, and therefore I think today when when the two sides sit and talk on the bilateral aspect of the relationship, they will talk about how these supply chains can be restored, and for that the end to a war becomes important. I mean, what happens between Russia and Ukraine is not what happens between, say, India and Pakistan on Siachen or Sir Creek. This is more. This is bigger than that. This has brought to the brought the world to a grinding halt. So therefore, it is imperative, and I think the Prime Minister in the conversations will factor in the global impact of it, but the bilateral aspect of it, of course, is very important from in terms of taking the trade to where it was and perhaps furthering it, drawing a roadmap to it for it. Secondly, from the point of view of food security, not just for India but for the global South as well, because India has come to represent the leadership of the global South, the countries where 2/3 of the world's humanity resides and who are the most vulnerable to these global supply disruptions, be it on food security, be it on energy security, etc. So, bilateral aspect of it, the global South aspect of it would be factored into the discussions today.
Yes.
Sakal.
And Amrit, before we leave you, if you could just quickly take us through the engagements of Prime Minister today going forward.
The Prime Minister is interacting right now with President Zelenskyy on a one-on-one format, followed by delegation-level talks. There are a few more, events where the President Zelenskyy and Prime Minister Modi go, say, to the Cube. They've already done the meteorology exposition. The Prime Minister is there for a few more hours before he takes the train back to Poland.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Amritpal Singh, for joining us on this special broadcast for the newsroom. Thank you. Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni continues to be with us, and Ambassador Soni, you've heard the whole conversation. We have a strategic expert, we have a foreign policy expert, you being the former envoy. Lieutenant Kulkarni, coming to you, before that, you wanted to add something to the strategic aspect, and we are expecting some agreements to be signed between the two. So, besides war, there is a mechanism which has been in place as far as two countries are concerned in the last few years, which has been in a way overshadowed by war, but war is not enough. There is much more to these ties between India and Ukraine.
You see, the Ukraine is an excellent place for getting technology in various sectors. For instance, the latest thing is on the space front. Do you know that the Mir station has most of the technology device in Ukraine? More importantly, the technical aspect of the tank, main battle tank, is also made in Ukraine, and we used to get things from outside. They supplied to Pakistan, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. What I'm trying to say is there are a lot of technologies which India can give. The drone technology is now the latest which is coming up. You would have heard the reports that a few days back there was 300, 400 drone attacks were attempted. Some of them failed, but we are upgrading our technology for drones. Then there is the electronic technology, particularly. So these are the areas. Then we also need the fertilizers and chemicals, which are very important inputs for our farming industry. We were getting it from there earlier. It's now stopped. For us, the main thing will be pharmaceutical export.
Okay.
We are really in a big way, and the Ukrainians are interested in getting investment from India on that. And there are Indian companies which are already doing it, and they would like to be given opportunities. So the scope is enormous. Do you know that the aircraft refit MiGs and Antonov, the factory is in Ukraine. So even during my time, they would fly in planes every 3 months for a refit. So what are the things which you were able to get from them? Some of the items which you were getting from Russia were highly priced. But when we went directly to the Ukrainian factories during my time, we got items which were not available before at a price which you could not even imagine. It created problem between Ukraine and Russia.
We're talking about 2 decades ago.
Yes. I'm sorry.
No, but that's fine. No, so just to understand, because this is important. I mean, the nations do have history. So it's, but how do you see this, the level of engagements 2 decades ago and the level of engagements, if we just isolate this whole thing with the war and not really put the conflict in perspective?
There is nothing but future ahead for us. Because till now we have not been able to capitalize on the potential which was existing there. Both ways. It's not just one way. We could do something for them. And do you know that for our space research, during my time there was, at that time he was not the President APJ Abdul Kalam. I have communications with him sending our scientists, scientific cooperation at scientist level.
Space and science.
Absolutely. No, now it is happening. It's not just technical, but now it's becoming application for commercial purposes, because Ukraine is not able to market their products as well as they could do, because it was the market economy was not existing. It was state economy at that time. That's where India also came in at that particular time. We can do that, work together. I mean, there was so much of body shopping which was done by Americans and the Chinese. I'm talking about the scientists, and they took them away in hundreds, in drones. We didn't do that. What we did was we would invite them to come to our institution.
So there is Ambassador Lieutenant General Kulkarni and Professor Singh. Can we have them on screen, please? A renewed focus, yes, Lieutenant General Kulkarni, a renewed focus, the domains that we are looking at, and defense happens to be one of them. Would you agree, you being a defense expert yourself, strategic expert yourself, as pointed out by Ambassador Soni, the warfare technology and sharing best technology in that space between India and Ukraine?
Definitely, Sakal. I think what the ambassador said, what we've been getting it from Ukraine and the cooperation that had been decades back. But I like the way he said, it's the future now that counts. And it is in that future we see the war has been 910 days now. I don't think it can go beyond a certain limit. Everything has a limit. And I think it's time now. You'll find slowly and steadily everything will start declining. And therefore, as a result of it, the relationship that we have with Ukrainians. Imagine the kind of number of medical students there. It's one found it cheaper to study in Ukraine than to study in India private medical colleges. That was the kind of, that is why you found so many medical students in Ukraine. Number one. Number two, you find even a lot of Bollywood interaction between Ukraine and India. That is another thing. So besides the scientific, besides the nuclear, besides what everyone agrees upon, that 4 crore population can feed 60 crore people in the world. The entire Africa virtually looks up to Ukraine for the granary that it has. It has iron ore, it has coal, it has ammonia, it has honey, you name a thing, cheese, uranium, thorium, whatever. It's absolutely. But the East Ukraine that has all of it now has fallen to Russia. That is where I think Ukraine is now insisting that they must get that part. Having said that, I personally feel that yes, the war will come to an end. There is no question. But whether it would to the good of all, may or may not, or would it be like North Korea and South Korea? Would it be like West Germany and East Germany once upon a time? What kind of a settlement there would be? But yes, the war will end. And in that context, the Ukrainian scientific knowledge, the Ukrainian ability from nuclear to space to drones, to even all our tanks, aircrafts, everything, that doesn't go. The knowledge base is there in Ukraine, and we all stand to benefit, mutual, even in the reconstruction of Ukraine, because obviously Ukraine has been devastated, a whole of it has been destroyed, and therefore Ukraine also requires a huge sum for reconstruction, and in that we can come forward. Even now for the various humanitarian assistance, we will give over 150 tons of whether it is tentage or whether pharmaceuticals are being supplied to Ukraine. So there's a lot. I thought between Ukraine and India, there is a very good relationship. And that relationship has to be built on, and it can stay on. Otherwise, how else can you expect someone like, the two enemy countries fighting, and here's a prime minister from a country at ease with both of them? And that shows the kind of standing and the feeling that exists between the two countries, that India can play a positive role in Ukraine, the further development and reconstruction. And the Russians do feel that, yes, there might just be a possibility of things easing off. This easing of business between the two countries is only when one, at least between the two, feels that they cannot go beyond. Just at a time that we thought, at least I thought, that probably Ukraine was on the back foot, this Kursk offensive took on. And so therefore, suddenly the Ukrainian morale has gone up, that they can sort of, go at least maybe 50, 60, 70 kilometers inside, take about 1,200 square kilometers, 92 odd villages, destroy 3 odd bridges on the same river. So all that, little morale definitely goes up. And this time, I think, probably, I feel that Russia also feels that, it's plateauing out, and the plateau has reached. The Ukrainians also feel, yes, on the offensive. So there is no victor, and no one is a loser. Now is the time where countries like India, Attempts have been done earlier also. China has attempted, Saudi Arabia has attempted, Turkey has attempted, the Christian, the church has attempted, but nothing has worked so far because both felt that they can get at each other. But today, I feel the very fact that the Prime Minister is feeling so much at ease, and look at the reception he's getting, and look at the way he's moving around in Ukraine. Just after a visit to Russia, there Zelenskyy himself condemned, though he should not have gone because the children had the kind of thing that happened in Ukraine. Despite all that, it's a good body language, good feeling. I personally see that things will ease off. It's the future that we have to look into and invest into. Reconstruction of Ukraine, the knowledge that we can get from Ukraine, the amount of the things that we go. We have to be of great help to Ukraine now because Ukraine has lost the resource-rich area of Donbass, of Luhansk, of the Kherson, Zaporizhia. All of it is gone now. Whether they'll get it back, that seems impossible virtually. As of now, it looks impossible because that is virtually East Ukraine, and so the whole of Ukraine goes East Ukraine and West Ukraine. And how the whole thing will move beyond.
Yes.
But yes,
okay.
The future looks bright.
Okay. In fact, besides Prime Minister Modi, there are very few world leaders who managed to visit both Russia and Ukraine. That includes leaders. Okay, we'll talk about that later. But Prime Minister Modi also, since we told you, paid floral tributes to Mahatma Gandhi's statue in Kyiv earlier today in a social media post, taking to a social media post X. Indian Prime Minister Modi said, and I quote, "Pay tributes to Mahatma Gandhi at Kyiv. The ideals of Bapu are universal and give hope to millions. May we all follow the path he showed to humanity." Quote unquote. Ambassador Soni, when we got those visuals, talking just about this, and Prime Minister taking to Twitter and the universal message of peace.
I think India is the land of peace, and before Gandhiji, this is also the land of Buddha.
He spoke about that in Poland,
yes. Yeah. So it comes naturally to us, and it also lends credibility. When India says that it's a time of peace, what exactly are we saying?
It's symbolic and it has an inherent message. Can we go back to the tweet and have Professor Swarn Singh, would you like to come in here, sir? The universal message of peace from Kyiv, from the heart of Kyiv, when Prime Minister Modi pays floral tributes to Mahatma Gandhi, the global peace icon. Professor Singh.
There is no doubt that Mahatma Gandhi is the most powerful personality that India has produced and is often very useful in linking to the rest of the world. In fact, by the last count, I think about 54 universities outside India were teaching Gandhian philosophy and Gandhian ideas. And his statues can be found around the world, and so also his statue in Kiev, in a very important place called A.B. Fomin Botanical Garden.
Okay.
And I want to underline here that a great botanist of last century, A.B. Fomin, was born in the same year as Mahatma Gandhi was born, 1869. So in that sense, there is another reconnection that we have now with this largest botanical garden and oldest botanical garden where the statue is located. So Mahatma Gandhi's message, his philosophy, in that sense also introduces the world what India stands for. And India stands for ensuring peace, prosperity, inclusiveness, sustainability of our initiatives. And that is very Gandhian, and Gandhi therefore becomes a bridge when we go to foreign countries and you want to introduce your country, you want to tell who you are, where are you from, what you intend to do. And if there is certain familiarity with Gandhi, that is very helpful and useful. And of course, we all invariably see every leader across the spectrum of political ideologies in this country and in other countries constantly showcasing that respect to Gandhi. And I think that's a very good beginning for Prime Minister when he's going to Kiev to underline that his message is message of peace. His message is not to help President Zelenskyy with more weapons
to
continue to fight against Russians. And I think another point that I must underline here is it's not a zero-sum game that India's building close partnerships with Ukraine are going to negatively impact India's partnerships with other countries, including Russia. 6 weeks back, when Prime Minister was in Moscow, they put themselves the target to take their trade by 2030 to $100 billion. Imagine 4 years back, the trade was $8 to $9 billion with import of now crude oil. Trade has gone up to $65 billion with Russia. So this rising economic leverages and heft of India, India has capability to build partnerships with all countries that are possible and that are useful for India. And when it comes to Ukraine, in space technology, in defense technology, in nuclear technologies, in education, in agriculture, so many sectors in areas where India and Ukraine can potentially work together, and we might see several of these MOUs coming out before end of the day today. So India is building relationship with Ukraine, which is a very significant country in many ways for us, just like India is very significant in many ways to them.
Okay.
And for India's effort to ensure early end of war is also meant to ensure that the two countries can build their positive.
I would also like you to, yes sir, talk a bit about the trade component as well. Ukraine is the key partner of EU, and European Union is India's largest trading partner. In that sense, we're looking at trade as a very important domain besides defense.
I think indeed, most of the consciousness in our country, thanks to colonial history of Portuguese and French and British coming here, is that Europe is imagined mostly in terms of Western Europe. We don't look at Central Europe, Eastern Europe, which is where expanding relationships are being built. So therefore, there's no doubt this meeting, this visit will lead to new initiatives in expanding trade. First of all, Amrit was just mentioning from $3.7 billion, it has come to $2.1 billion. It can easily go back at least where it was, and it can go beyond that definitely, because once you have strong bilateral relationship, trade can expand much quickly. It can go to investments. It could lead to exchanges in terms of experts, education sector, and so on. But I think also most important, as all of us are underlining here, is potential for a very strong and productive defense relationship, maybe possibly in space sector as well, or other science and technology sectors which are going to be really complementary to both sides. So there is a very strong possibility of very good economic relationship.
Given Ukraine's beleaguered economy, they would want and rely more upon India's investments as well.
Indeed, I would say investments from both sides. I mean, if you look at it, Ukraine is, in terms of their per capita income, far ahead of India. Several times ahead of India in that sense. So it's not only that India can potentially start investing in Ukraine, of course, particularly when it comes to reconstruction of post-war Ukraine, India will have a major role to play, I'm sure. But it is not to deny that potentially you will also see Ukraine investing in many sectors in India, particularly in agriculture sector, where it's really one of the most advanced countries. I mean, there was a time when India was not talking to Israel. And now we have a very strong relationship with Israel in several sectors, including agricultural sector that I was reminded of.
Okay.
So there are moments when countries, start opening up relationship with countries that they did not have a relationship before, and that can turn out to a very successful relationship.
Okay.
Today, Israel is a very important partner for India, and potentially Ukraine may be a very powerful partner for India as well.
Okay. Lieutenant General Kulkarni, you wanted to speak here on the trade ties.
See, what happens, Sakal, we are the 5th largest economy today. Sooner, they're going to become the 3rd largest. From 5 trillion, they're looking at 10 trillion, $15 trillion economy. In that context, just look at Ukraine, the amount of reconstruction facilities and the amount we can contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine. Ukraine also sees today, like what Professor Swarani is talking about, $15,000 is their per capita income. It was before the war started. So they were very well off. There is no denying the fact. And the fact that they now need us, because we also have over the years grown to such a level, and we intend to keep growing at even 7%. 10 trillion and 15 trillion is not very far for us. most of us might see it in our lifetime, all this kind of a thing. So therefore, who else will help countries like Ukraine in reconstruction? So obviously, Ukraine also looks towards India. India has over the years looked at Ukraine from the point of view of defense cooperation, nuclear cooperation, agriculture, fertilizers, pharmaceuticals, and so a lot of things that Ukraine was giving. Today, Ukraine will be looking towards India. India will be taking it. Again, when India is looking at it, taking on the mantle of leadership for Global South, the world looks at India as to what is that India can give them. India started off in COVID. What an initiative in which we distributed vaccines to all those who required it. So everyone's looking up to India that yes, this is a country which is rising. This is a country, is not an expansionist. This is one country which seems to cooperate, is willing to talk, is willing to go out of the way, has democracy, has rule of law. We can expect something good from this country, investments, people, human resource, so much that India can give to the entire world. So why not? And doing well. And in that context, I think Ukraine also looks up to India. Russia also looks up to India. The Global South looks up to India. And that is why we find that our own standing the world over has risen. And that rise is to the good of the world and not for destructive, but constructive, more peaceful. And what better ambassador that we have at all time with Mahatma Gandhi. He looks up to Mahatma Gandhi. So wherever it is, even in Poland, Kolhapur and places like Jamnagar could be thought of and spoken of in Poland is indicative that how much our old ancestors, everybody along, our legacy is of peace, our legacy is of accommodating.
India's civilizational footprints, India's legacy, and above all, our Bapu, father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, who's been, in fact, the global ambassador of peace. And in fact, gentlemen, if you could just stay with us, Professor Swan Singh and Lieutenant General Kulkarni and also Ambassador Soni in our studio, let's quickly do a recap of what all has happened as far as Prime Minister Modi's visit in Ukraine is concerned. He's in Kyiv as we speak. Earlier, Prime Minister Modi visited the multimedia martyrologist exposition on children at the National Museum of History of Ukraine in Kyiv. These are the visuals of that visit that took place a while back. Prime Minister Modi, as we can see, is accompanied by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Prime Minister was deeply touched, visible in those visuals as well, by the poignant exposition set up in memory of children who have lost their lives in the ongoing conflict. Prime Minister Modi expressed his deep sorrow at the tragic loss of young lives and, as a mark of respect, placed a toy in their memory. So very symbolic. Would you like to add?
This can't be more touching than that, because I think children have been attacked, they have been devastated. To acknowledge that why is it that the future is being struck? And to me, there cannot be worse attempt to traumatize a small coming generation. A toy is symbolic. It brings joy to the child that he feels, look, there is some care that is coming my way. I think that is where Prime Minister Modi's gesture has to be seen, that he was empathizing with the children and trying to tell them that, look, you have gone through some problem, we are there, the next generation will take care of you.
Peace is the resolution. I think this is
peace
also
is the
something
only
which,
way. There is nothing,
reiterates.
Yeah, that's what it says. Symbolism is peace. That without peace, there cannot be any future for the humanity.
And moving on, Prime Minister Modi also a while back paid homage to Mahatma Gandhi at his statue in Kyiv today. Prime Minister Modi's visit to Ukraine comes nearly 6 weeks after his high-profile trip to Moscow. Prime Minister Modi also underscored the timeless relevance of Mahatma Gandhi's message of peace in building a harmonious society. He noted that the path shown by Mahatma Gandhi offered solutions to present-day global challenges. Prime Minister Mahatma Gandhi's statue, located in Oasis of Peace Park in Kyiv, serves as a beacon of hope and peace for humanity. And Prime Minister's visit, Professor Swan Singh, Prime Minister Modi's visit to the Oasis Park and to the Memorial of Children is highly symbolic, with a very strong message that the war must end.
There is no doubt. I think these are minute-to-minute programs of national leaders that are very carefully calibrated. And therefore, what goes first and what goes last is very significantly sequenced. To start the visit with playing floral tribute to the father of the nation, the apostle of peace, Mahatma Gandhi, is in that sense is an attempt to showcase India's heritage, India's legacy, what India stands for, and also by doing that, setting the tone of what will take place as a follow-up events. Just like you mentioned, the exhibition that Indian Prime Minister also attended is again something which is very significant. In fact, most wars, they show that parties to war are beginning to move towards termination of war by signs like remorse and regret. They begin to at least communicate that part of the war involved things that they did not wish should have happened, is part of that explanation that, these are things that definitely we regret, we have remorse about these things. These are very important signs in war termination efforts in that sense. So Indian Prime Minister attending that audiovisual exhibition also is very significant in that sense. And what transpired in their one-to-one meeting, I'm sure, is setting the very ground for where the delegation level talks will take bilateral relations forward in signing some of the MOUs, agreements, and also maybe creating some groundwork for future mutual understandings that will flow from today's visit, and we will see outcomes happening in coming weeks, months, and years in that sense. But I think it's laying foundations of a very significant relationship. It's also laying foundations of India's role at the global level in being an important country to address challenges like the war which is going on between Ukraine and Russia.
India at the global stage, India at a high table as far as global stage is concerned. Lieutenant General Kulkarni, as a G20 member and also as a key player in various international forums, how do you really see this? India has a potential. Do you see this to shape the discourse, and here particularly around the Ukrainian crisis?
100%.
There is a sense of acknowledgement, would you say? Remember when PM was in Russia, NATO and West was watching. Now PM is in Ukraine, US and Russia is closely watching. And we are all friends.
That is the best part. India plays a good facilitator. India is not seen as someone with hidden agenda. India is on the world stage, and tomorrow the top 3 economies, 2 of them are democracies. China, the world doesn't trust to, because one doesn't know what the hidden agenda of China is. Expansionism, debt diplomacy, capture the area. So Chinese are not trusted. China is losing in America. China is losing in Europe, though Chinese might have a footprint in Africa. But India is seen all over, be it in Africa, be it in South America, be it in America, be it in Europe, be it in Africa, be it in the Middle East, anywhere and everywhere you find, or in Southeast Asia, South Asia, you find India is being seen as a reliable partner. India is being seen an old civilization which can be trusted. And that is where we play a great role. Human resource of India, super. And one cannot imagine the kind of brains that Indians have. Now, tomorrow, the Indians are going to even have money to be able to put on the table to help reconstruct countries, raise our own standard of living. All that counts a lot. When they come over here, they see India in a different context. The standard of happiness, the standard of prosperity is different. In India, they can see a poor man, happy man, unlike what they see in their own countries.
Okay.
There, everything is dated, monetary gain. India is not necessarily monetary gain. India contributes to wisdom. India contributes to knowledge. India contributes to taking people along. India contributes also to the upliftment. So all that, India has a separate image, and the Indian image
so that
itself
Bharat
is
Vishwaguru image, that narrative.
Yes, Sakal, it makes a world of a difference, because see, the very fact that you see Zelenskyy with the body language, the kind of meeting that he's having with the Prime Minister, the kind of rapport that the Prime Minister has with the Russian president, he has it with the Americans, he has it with the Europeans, the way he's respected and honored the world over, be it in Saudi Arabia or be it in Africa or anywhere else, is indicative that yes, India has arrived. India is seen as someone may not be very rich, may not be, but very knowledgeable, a country of wisdom, a country which is now sooner or later going to be the third largest economy, and is willing to share. That sharing, that hope that India is one country which seems balanced, it has a rule of law, democracy, and something that they can associate and feel familiar and feel at ease. I think that makes a lot of difference for Indians. Even when we all go everywhere, we see for ourselves that they're talking to us is very differently. They trust us when they talk to us. So
I think the trust,
nation's pride.
Yes, the trust is kind of visible. If you look at these visuals, Ambassador Soni, and the way Prime Minister has kept his hand on President Zelensky's shoulder, this is so reaffirming, reassuring. I would ask and understand from you that there is a tremendous potential that the world has recognized, particularly Ukraine. That's why our Prime Minister is here, that India can shape the discourse as far as Ukraine crisis.
I think it's very important. I think you've made a very correct observation, because not only just the embrace, but after that, when the embrace was over, he was standing with him with a hand on his neck. It's reassuring for the person, because it would have given confidence. Here is a person who speaks for how many people, and what kind of a message he brings, and what is it that he's going to offer, and he's trying to come in between and say to sort these things out. This is absolutely amazing, and I think no other world leader could have aspired to even come anywhere near that. As regards what the future is, I think he says at least something is going on, some talk is going on, because till now there was absolutely nothing happening. There was no discussion going on, there was no attempt made. But right now, the fact that he is here, he has brought his vision, vision is important, because without vision, there is nothing you can do. So he has come up with his vision, broad vision, having dealt with all kinds of situations, problems which are facing the world, problems which are facing in India. He will come and tell them that, look, calm down.
So, you've been a former envoy to Ukraine, sir, and I mean, if you could just explain to us briefly the trajectory of this relationship. I mean, the world has absolutely changed in the last 2 decades, but the way we've engaged with Ukraine, this of course being the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister, the way under the regime of Prime Minister Modi, the way we have moved from non-alignment to multi-alignment in the multipolar world, a shift in foreign policy discourse.
Yeah, because I think things don't remain static. 50s, 60s, 70s were different, totally different. There is no superpower in terms of this other bloc. I mean, there is one Western bloc, but there is no second power. It's a different shift has taken place. China and Russia are trying to bolster and come as a counter, but there isn't anything which we have to choose. We had to choose in the 50s and 60s when the two blocks were coming up, military blocks were coming up. Right now, it's a grouping which he is trying to challenge the already established order. So India doesn't want again to be a part, but it wants to negotiate. It wants to move with them. It wants to understand. It wants to be the mediator. I don't like the word mediator. Facilitator. Because we would like to talk sense into both the sides without taking sides.
Yes.
So that's the point which.
Yes. Lieutenant General Kulkarni and Professor Saran Singh both on this one. Professor Singh, to you first. Not as a mediator, but somebody who can talk to both sides and, as in the words of Ambassador Soni, put some sense.
Indeed, Ambassador Soni mentioned of United States as the only superpower, and there is no equivalent superpower on the other side. That makes me think of the Indian Prime Minister in July going to Moscow, in August going to Kiev. Next month, he's going to United States, possibly addressing the UN General Assembly, maybe going to White House. And therefore, he's engaging the spectrum of global powers in that sense of how to deal with this most significant challenge that world has been facing for 2.5 years. So that takes the stature at that international level in that sense, where India is not seen as a confrontationist or revisionist. India is seen as a more peace productive, positive partner by most countries, with minor irritants once in a while with many of them. So in that sense, I think it also underlines the changing stature of India, and it is using of that stature that India can make substantial contribution to pushing the peace efforts forward. I'm not saying mediator, I'm not even saying facilitator or messenger. It's India's very imperceptive, incremental, behind the curtain, modest efforts to ensure that the parties begin to engage each other. That's what is significant, because the division is so huge right now. I mean, look at the kind of posturing that both sides are doing. Now, the Ukrainian leadership is not simply saying that Russia should move back to where it was in February of 2022. They are saying we have to deal with the potential and future possibilities of Russian imperialism. They are bringing in the whole issue of decolonizing Dagestan, Chechnya, parts of Moldova, Georgia, and so on. So this kind of strategic posturing which is happening, Moscow on the other side is saying, Ukraine must begin by making a pledge. It will never join NATO, never join European Union, and so on. Now, how to part that huge gulf is not easy effort. And therefore, I think the more imperceptive incremental efforts are made, they could bear fruit.
Bridging this gulf, here comes India's new strategic move of late, the expansion of the non-alignment policy of Prime Minister Modi and expanding it by introducing the multi-alignment concept, a strategy of all-vector hedging in its geopolitics. I want to take this point to Lieutenant General Kulkarni. India as a bridging, as someone who can talk to all sides.
Definitely. As the time passes, India will also have deep pockets. When India will have deep pockets, India is seen as a civilization which can be trusted. We have been there on the scene ever since mankind. So everybody knows what India is all about, whether it's in terms of knowledge. And knowledge is power. And when you have deep pockets, you have knowledge, you have hope, you can be trusted, you have rule of law, you have democracy, where you have everything going to your way. I think the world looks up to you that yes, we can. There is a country on whose shoulder we can cry, and that will be not seen as being subservient, but as a partner. And that reliable partnership feeling, when they get that, that vibe is very important in any relationship. And when there's a good vibe that develops with Indians, when we all go abroad as tourists, that same vibe is there. We are trusted. It's an Indian, we can trust it. Unlike most other things that it's. So in that context, slowly and steadily, when India will become the third largest economy, India will grow to a $10 trillion and $15 and $20 trillion economy. And the kind of values that we have, the kind of trust that we develop, the kind of hope and sharing capability. Very important that India is willing to share. Even when we don't have anything, we are willing to share. Look at the way time in COVID times, there are countries which are entirely grateful to India for sharing. So it is in that context that India has a bright future. India has a definitely super human resource, technology, absorption, as well as being able to
get. Coming back to India-Ukraine relationship, Professor Singh, ever since the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries in the last 30 years back, when the Soviet Union collapsed, emerged as a new nation state. Final comments from you, Professor Singh. This whole expansion from non-alignment to multi-alignment in the multipolar world at the juncture of this Prime Minister's visit to Ukraine. I think the world is watching this.
Absolutely, because you just mentioned of India recognizing the new state of Ukraine without being any, worries about how will Moscow look at it. So India has gradually, in last 3 decades or 2 decades or 1 decade, depending on where you want to see that inflection point, has gradually become much more, sort of visible and effective. India was always global in its sort of worldview and civilizational heritage and outlook towards life. What has changed is India has not just intentions, but increasingly also capabilities and leverages. Okay. As General was mentioning, once we become 10 to 15 trillion economy, we will have to engage the world in a very different fashion.
Right.
And world has to understand that. And it is part of that unfolding of greater power, stature of India that is visible now in this visit of Indian Prime Minister in Ukraine as well.
Bharat the Vishwaguru, India the world leader. Final comments also from Ambassador Soni, the former envoy to Ukraine.
What I would like to correct is, we don't want to be Vishwaguru, but we want to be Vishwabandhu. Because we don't want to preach. Guru, we are very modest, so we shouldn't be thinking that we can teach the whole world. We have a message, and it's for the other side to take the message and understand from us. But we want to empathize with you. We are not above you. We are not different from you. We are a part of you. We want to share our experiences.
India's voice matters.
Give you. Yeah.
But India's voice
exactly.
matters.
That at the end of the day, India's voice will matter because it is over generation. It's a million old.
And in this context, in the Ukraine context,
in the wisdom which is acquired, that is where with the modesty, I would put it, that India is there to give you a helping hand. It's the time for you. It's the time for you. You have come to us. We will not let you go, and we will not let you down.
Okay, so that's India's message to Ukraine?
Yes.
Yes. On that note, many thanks, Ambassador Soni, for joining us on this very special broadcast. Thank you very much, sir. I also thank Lieutenant General Kulkarni. He's smiling out there. Thank you so much. And of course, Professor Singh. Namaste. Thank you all of you for being part of this conversation on a special broadcast. Prime Minister Modi's visit to Ukraine. And with that, it's time to wrap up. That's all for this edition on the Prime Minister Modi in Ukraine special broadcast. From me and my entire team, thank you very much for staying with us on this. But for those of you on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app, on which you can watch all our live broadcasts. The application is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download. That's the QR code on your screen, and we will be back with more news and updates as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Sakal Bhatt signing off, and on the other side, my colleague Gautam joins you for more. Stay with us.